That is quite the bright painting behind you.
It's
What is,
it's Alexander Benoit. It's a blow up from a work that we had in an exhibition last year. It was a selfie spot that we created.
Got it. That was cool. Who came up with that idea to do the selfie thing?
Our marketing people. And after the exhibition, I just peeled it off the wall and stuck it in my office.
Because you are the executive director of education there too, right?
Well, I'm the chief curator and director of education. Yeah.
So the Ralston Crawford exhibit you did, right? You set all that up?
Oh, yeah.
All right. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the thing. I don't want to take the plunder away from this podcast. I have Dr. Jerry Smith on today. He's the head curator and executive director of education at the Daytona Art Institute. Is that correct? Or Institute of Art?
Dayton.
What did I say? Dayton.
You said Daytona.
Well, you wanted to be in Daytona.
You took me to Florida.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you were in St. Petersburg for a while.
Yeah, I was there for a short bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Sorry, Dayton. Didn't mean to take you away from Daytona or vice versa. It's been a while since I've seen you. I thought your hair would be all gray by now, but it's not. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, last time I saw you was for the opening of the Dixon exhibition.
Yeah.
In Scottsdale, Dixon and Gil Waldman's collection.
Oh yeah, that was 2019 probably, or 2020.
Yeah, it was back when we were still traveling.
Yeah, it was when we didn't have a mask on our face.
Exactly.
Yes, time goes very quickly in the world. Soon we'll all be at the metaverse, so we won't have to worry about that. We'll just be living online. And the thing behind you will be very normal in the metaverse.
Exactly.
By the way, for people who are not watching this on YouTube, you can flip it on YouTube so you can see the picture we're talking about. It's quite interesting, actually. So tell me, what is new with you? Just let her rip.
Well, I've been doing a lot of things. I've been here in Dayton now for just a bit over 4 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
I know. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. I feel like I'm still brand new. I came here to be chief curator and was here for in 2019 when we had our centennial celebration. So 100 years as a museum. Terrific collection. That's why I wanted to come. It's a encyclopedic collection. So a little bit of everything.
I noticed they had oceanic and Native American as well.
Yeah, and African and Asian and of course American, European.
How big is the building itself? Do you know?
I believe gallery spaces are about 60,000, so 100 and something thousand square feet. The museum, the institute, Dayton Art Institute, used to be a school. So they an accredited school. You could get a 4-year degree here, and that ended in the 76. But that's why it's an art institute.
I wondered about that when I saw that. Yeah, why they had that name. So it was a school. And so is it unusual? I'm just, I haven't really even thought about it before, but to have art institutions in America that are 100 years old or older, that's fairly uncommon, isn't it?
Well, it's
maybe not on the East Coast, or maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking east, it's not as uncommon, but there was a lot of museums opening in the early part of the 20th century. So it's not that uncommon, but it's still a nice, good long run for a museum. Phoenix, for instance, I think they had just had their 60th, I believe it is.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And
Tucson's maybe 75 or something, I think.
yeah,
Santa Fe, actually, they opened in 1918, so I guess that's
yeah,
been
yeah.
100 years. So.
Mhm.
So I digressed and just jumped into what you're doing, but I actually want to kind of get the backstory too, because some
Sure.
of it I know, but a lot of it I probably don't have a clue. I mean, I probably have known you, or I've known of you at least 30 years, I think, and known you
Yeah.
probably 25. But where did you grow up?
I always say I grew up in Phoenix. Wasn't born there. I was born in Illinois, but my parents moved when I was 3 to Fremont, California, across the bay from San Francisco. But as an early teen, my parents then moved to Phoenix. And so really Phoenix, that was where I would say that's where I grew up. That's where I learned how to drive.
Mm,
And
yeah.
otherwise you're from like a block or two in a region. But
That's
once
where
you learn to
kiss
drive.
girls and all that stuff too, bro.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I grew up in Phoenix and lived there for a long time.
Yeah. What did your folks do?
Folks were working folks. My dad in Phoenix, he drove a truck, local delivery for a food service, for craft food service.
Hmm.
And my mom worked in retail.
What kind of retail? Do you
She
remember?
worked in the jewelry department at Mervyn's. Remember Mervyn's?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, it was a good store. It was a higher end store for sure.
Yeah, so she did that sort of thing. Yeah, they were working folks.
Yeah.
Growing up, my dad was a milkman. So
Oh wow.
he,
You mean
he would get up.
when he was in California, he was a milkman? Or was it-
Yeah, in California, he was a milkman. So
Tell people what a milkman is, because most people actually don't know unless they're our age or older.
yeah, he would grow up. He would get up early in the morning and deliver milk to people's homes. So you would leave your bottles, your empty bottles out, and he would put new bottles in. Later, it was cartons, of course. And growing up, that meant we always had ice cream in the house. It was great.
We call it Uber Eats now instead of a milkman, but they still deliver the milk in a different fashion. So do you still like ice cream or?
You bet. To this day, I still have a bowl of cereal almost every morning with my milk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when your dad would come home, did you guys run to see if he brought ice cream when it was at that time?
No, because it was always there. He always brought home ice cream.
Oh, I got it.
We always had ice cream.
You probably think of him every time you go and get an ice cream now.
Oil. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I load up a big giant thing of ice cream. People are like, man, that's a lot of ice cream. And it's like, well, that's what we grew up with.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so were you interested in art or made art when you were a kid, like, grade school, middle school, high school?
I was interested. Always like to kind of doodle and stuff, but definitely in high school, I think I started to show a real interest. And my folks, they never went to museums. I don't recall them ever taking us to an art museum or anything. And I'm the youngest of 6.
Wow.
But I just remember going myself. Remember I went on a high school date to the Phoenix Art Museum. And, I thought I was the bomb, taking a girl to a date to the museum. She was completely bored. So we didn't have a second date. But so I always loved art. I always just really, really liked looking, reading about it, finding out about, doing the research kind of thing. And so my story is I didn't go to college right out of high school. I worked, actually went and worked in the warehouse from the company my dad was driving a truck for, Craft Food Service.
Did he get you the job?
Sort of, yeah. And it wasn't immediately after high school. I went through a few different jobs, sold furniture for a while, random things. But in my early 20s is when I went to work for a craft, working nights in a warehouse where I lifted boxes for a living. I mean, it was hard, heavy work. I used to have to load trucks by hand.
Oh, God.
And these are those big cases of, like you see the big can of, tomato sauce. Well, this is the boxes of those cans, and you would have to just lift those for 8, 10, 12 hours a night.
This is the opposite of ice cream.
Yeah, this was working that ice cream off. So, I was working nights in a warehouse, and I decided to take some art history classes during the day at Phoenix Community College. And it was the second course that I took with Harriet Dolphin, was the teacher, where I'm in the class, and all of a sudden it was just like the light bulb went off where I said, wow, people do this sort of thing for a living? How is this possible? So then I realized, wow, there's a lot more out there with this art world thing. Fortunately, was right around the time I was getting married. My wife, her family were educators, taught high school. Her father was a high school principal. And so she was like, gosh, you love this stuff so much. You should do this. So we saved up a little bit. And I ultimately quit work and was 30 something when I went back to school and went to Arizona State, got my bachelor's and master's.
Let me just ask you, so you lifted those boxes for about 8 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That was a long time to work in a warehouse.
Yeah.
Now, I did graduate. I went from the night guy to eventually was working during the day. And during the day, that means you're restocking. So I was much more driving the forklift.
Yeah.
Lifting things by hand.
And what did your folks think when, especially your dad, when you said, Pops, I'm leaving this good job I've had for 8 years and I'm going to go and become a art historian / curator? What was his concept on that?
They thought it was great. They were very supportive. They loved the idea. They had no clue what it was. Even when I was, working in the museum, they had no clue really what I was doing.
Yeah.
They just thought I ran the museum. So,
yeah, as far as you're concerned, that's all they needed to know.
Yeah, exactly. They would come and see shows and be impressed, and that was terrific.
Were any of your other siblings doing things like this too, or what kind of work were they doing?
They've a variety of things. From working in healthcare industry to brother who owns a pool cleaning business in Florida to one who's manages a car lot. So, I mean, we're all over the board. I had one sister who had some artistic inclinations. She did those study at home courses.
Yes.
I remember when I was little. Growing up.
Yeah.
But she never pursued it or anything as far as art goes. So I'm the only one in the family.
The outlier.
To pursue art and go to college and do all that fun stuff.
So you go back to college, and this is what year would this have been approximately?
This would have been in 94.
94, and you're 30 at that time, more or less.
I was 33 at the time.
Yeah. Okay. And so what did you think you wanted to do at that time? Did you have an idea?
I thought I would teach because that was the example I saw.
Right.
Even though I was going to museums, I didn't make that connection of, there are people at the museums doing these jobs. Right. I thought I would teach. That's the example I saw. And then I was, it was during my master's course that Jim Ballinger from Phoenix Art Museum gave me a call out of the blue. My name had been given to him by Betsy Fallman, who I worked closely with at ASU, because he was looking for a research assistant half-time for 3 months. He wanted some side research for the Taos artists and their patrons exhibition.
I remember that show. Yeah, I remember that whole
Heck of
thing.
a show.
Yeah, great book.
So yeah, he called me, left the message on the tape machine, this is Jim Ballinger, that great deep voice of his. And just saying, your name was given to me. Would you like to talk about a possible research position? So I went down, talked to him. It pretty much became full-time right away and lasted 1.5 years before I finally had to leave to go do my PhD work. So, and it was then during the doing work at the museum when I realized, no, I want to be a curator.
Yeah.
I was in the vaults, in the storage area. Forget the project I was working on, but I'm going through some bins, and all of a sudden, this little Corot painting is there.
Yeah.
And suddenly, and I've got the gloves on, but suddenly I'm holding this little Corot in my hands. It's right there. That surface is right there. I could, he breathed on this. He created this. It's right there. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it was such a powerful connection that I was just like, I need to do this. This is what I need to do. And that's when I knew I was going to be museum work, that I wanted to be a curator.
So do you think some of that is this connection that you have and I have as well to objects is as much about the history as it is actually the object itself?
In many ways, yeah. It really is that combination, because I can absolutely love a work of art that I don't have a clue about the history of it. I can, I'm educated enough now, I can typically place things in a certain context of when it was made and probably where, type of thing. But I don't need that to enjoy it. That's why there was an exhibition that I worked on, put together in Phoenix, of unknown works by unknown unknown artists, that European works that we didn't have the knowledge of who made it, which meant you are forced to look at this object or at these objects without that baggage of biography that comes with so many works. You just have the work itself.
So I'm sure you guys were looking at it and going, what's the time frame? What's the history? How does it fall in? So it brings this whole history thing back, that the piece, which you're literally giving it to it, right? And now you're part of the history because you're making history with the pieces.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I would come back. Does that then all of a sudden add this sense of igniting your imagination and your emotional limbic system to that piece? I've never really thought about this, but I see it almost as two different things. When you say you can see a great painting, you don't really maybe know who it is and you get pleasure and you like it. I have that same component. But if I know that piece was owned by Benjamin Franklin or something, all of a sudden my imagination goes wild. Where was this? How did it end up here? What was the deal? Did he did he sit there and stare at it as I am? So I don't know. It sounds like a book to me. Probably already out there somewhere, but
it goes back to that idea of collectors, that you never really own a work of art. You just care for it for a time.
Yeah. And so that Corot, have you gone back and seen it ever since that one time? It really ignited?
Oh, sure. absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
There you go. And you still get that sense when you look at it?
I do.
Yeah, I get that. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So you leave to go back and do your PhD. This is at ASU?
No, no, the PhD work I did in Kansas,
Hmm.
University of Kansas. I worked with Charlie Eldridge
Hmm.
in Kansas, a great American art historian, former director of the Smithsonian American Museum of Art. I think he was one who wrote his dissertation on O'Keeffe.
Hmm. Yeah.
Back when you could write a dissertation on O'Keeffe, just O'Keeffe, Wow. So he's in that early on, but just one of the most brilliant individuals I've ever met. And he happened to be somebody that Jim Ballinger worked with as well.
Yeah, he's from Kansas. Jim's from Kansas, right?
Jim's from Kansas. And for me, I was looking at a few different schools, but kismet or something, the gods were smiling down. My wife was recruited to be the director of communications for the School of Fine Arts at Kansas 6 months before I applied. So she was like, so I ended up moving there before I was actually accepted into the program, and just was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I was kind of like there already, kind of like, you guys have to accept me.
Otherwise, you got to go back to the warehouse, I guess.
So fortunately, yes, they did accept me, of course, to the program. And then
that was what, a 2 or 3 year program?
3 or 4.
Yeah.
Which ended up taking much longer because of the dissertation took forever. And that was because it was within a really short time, a week or 2 after I turned in my proposal. I finished all the coursework and I taught the whole time I was studying. So I was one of those lucky people that, because of work connections, my wife worked at ASU. So I had discounted tuition there, and plus I worked. I was a teaching assistant. Then in Kansas, I was teaching classes while I was taking the PhD. So I got through the whole thing without any debt.
Nice.
Yeah, that's fabulous when you hear the stories that you hear. But right after I turned in my proposal for the dissertation, within a couple of weeks, the position for Associate Curator of American Art opened at Phoenix Art Museum, which was a position I had to have. So I went at that job, at interview, the whole thing with gusto. I did not go into it with a sense of, well, everybody knows me already, I don't even need to try.
Right.
I worked hard to get that job, and I did. And Jim Ballinger, again, he had been the curator of American art. He started as curator,
Yes,
then became director for 30 years. But he decided he needed to step away from the curatorial side completely. So they hired associate curator, moi, and so I had to create what that position would be. And doing that under the person who had been doing it and is still there was a little daunting, but
I'm sure. And an icon.
And an icon, yeah. But he was the most gracious as far as allowing people to grow into a position.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Let you learn some mistakes along the way, where afterwards he was like, see,
yeah,
I was kind of saying maybe you want to think about that, kind of stuff. But it meant I was working full time plus because it has always been a lean staff there at Phoenix.
Yeah. So you were
And
commuting back from Kansas and,
well, no, I moved because I was finished my coursework.
oh, I see.
So
I got it.
I moved to Phoenix, and then on weekends and the occasional night when I wasn't working on museum stuff, I would try to write my dissertation.
And what was your dissertation on?
The automobile in American art to
Oh, that's right.
1950.
I knew that. I remember I had a Dixon.
Hey,
on
got that
Channel 11.
Dixon,
Yeah.
yeah.
Still have
Yeah,
it.
and it wasn't about cars and car design. I'm not a car guy at all. But it was more about just what did mobility mean for artists? What happens when the the awe-inspiring vista that takes months to trek to, and you have to bring all your stuff. What happens when that's suddenly a scenic overlook that you just pull the car up to get out? And typically artists would do that, get out and turn their back to that hunk of modernism that got them there and paint the pristine landscape. Then put the thing back, painting back in their car and drive away. And it was about the changing infrastructure of America, the roads and the roadside diners, the gas stations, about artists creating mobile studios. O'Keeffe having her custom-made vehicle where she could line up paintings where she could sit in her vehicle and paint. And when it got hot, she would climb underneath lay down underneath the car there in New Mexico. So it was about and it really kind of grew out of a couple of paintings that wonderful Walter Hoofer painting.
I know that one.
Bob Abbott and his assistant, the one at the Speed Art Museum. That painting and another one by Edward Hopper just started getting me thinking about it.
That's a great topic. I get it.
And yeah, it's a great topic. It's a huge topic.
It's a monster
topic. I mean, first half century of automobiles and what that means to America. That it should have been, the road trips of John Sloan from 1916 to 1919.
Yeah, right.
I should have really, narrowed it down. But so I had this monster project. So it took forever for me to write it, but I finally did. Finally got through it.
Yeah, Dixon, by the way, thought the Model T was the scourge of the West.
Yes.
That's exactly what he said. He did not like it. Just as you said, you get all the tourists, you get these people coming, they're not working to get to the places that they need to get to.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you found that on other artists too.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating that as car crazy as we are as Americans, trying to think of a quote, but it's slipping my mind. But one thing that always struck me was there is no singular kind of car image that strikes everybody. There's no American Gothic of the automobile. And you would think there would be.
Yeah, you would think there would be.
But there just isn't. And it's a lot of, as you start to look at American art, there's not a lot of paintings that deal with automobile as a subject. Usually if it's in a picture, it's coming in on the side, you just get a little glimpse of the front end of a car, or it's parked, it's just part of the landscape,
right?
But it's rarely the subject. There's a wonderful John Sloan painting, Gray and Brass from, I think it's 1905. But otherwise, cars weren't easy to paint. The artists needed to learn shapes and things of a car to paint it. And then if you paint a car and your painting doesn't sell right away, suddenly you have a really dated looking painting.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Dixon wanted to put in the murals for the Bureau of Indian Affairs a car, know, and Harold Ickes said they don't have cars. Dixon's like, yeah, they do. But it's not, native enough for Ickes, so they didn't allow it. So did you do anything with the dissertation as far as a book form? Or, I mean, it sounds like a wonderful book.
I just did it in the just the dissertation. I haven't done it yet as an exhibition. I hope to, and at that point is when
Yeah, then
I'll
you do the
create
thing.
the
That means
catalog.
that, you should. I mean, that is such a, get Tesla to fund it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's a big, good, wonderful project, and I do want to really get back to it some point. And the reason I stopped at 1950 was because there have been a lot of things dealing with later images of automobiles. Once all where America gets the freeways and the highways and things, and a lot the pop artists start to look at automobiles as a subject. There's been a lot of looking at that period, but
Mhm.
not so much that earlier period when rural America suddenly had access to everywhere.
Mhm. Well, there's a movie out right now called Power of the Dog that it's in Montana in 1925, and they have cars in it, and and they're out in the West. It's a Western, but they use cars and they show cars, and it's unusual. And they make them a focal point kind of the imagery. So
Yeah.
maybe you should see that. It's on Netflix right now. It might really, you would get inspiration, I'm sure, when you saw that, just like,
Yeah.
he's seeing this in a different form or fashion, the director is.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say, when you go to get your PhD, did you ever think, oh, I want to be a museum director, or did you always say, I am a curator? That's what I'm interested in.
I always thought I would, it was always the curatorial side, the putting together exhibitions, the collecting, the doing that part. The directing side of things, it's such a different animal.
Yeah.
That you're needing to do a lot more working with the board and the development side of things, of doing the fundraising. Not that I'm afraid to do the ask. I certainly am willing to do that. It's just that it is a different thing that will often take you away from the art in many ways.
Yeah.
Best example that I can always remember is one time, again, Jim Ballinger, walking into Jim's office, and he's sitting there with 2 carpet samples because they're looking at getting new carpet in the museum store. And he has 2 samples that he's looking at. And I just looked at him and said, yeah, that's why you got an art history, isn't it?
Well, the thing about being a curator is you still have the creativity. You get to do that creativity in design and deciding what, to bring to people's awareness. And yeah, I get it. I mean, it is a different beast for sure.
Yeah, and I've been really fortunate to work with directors who allow curators to do what they do, not to interfere. I've worked with directors who very much want to interfere and just come in and say, no, move this here, move that there, move that. And that's it's like, gee, thanks for letting me do my job.
Yeah, they're probably pissed that they're the director and really still want to do the curation themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true. I get it. I see it.
And so I did direct for a short time. When I went to after Jim retired and they brought in a new director in Phoenix, I decided to look at other places, and somebody came recruiting, came to me saying, we're looking for a chief curator, which was the right kind of position for me to move to look for at that point in my career. It had been a decade working in Phoenix. And so went to Florida, Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg. And a short time after I was there, just couple of months, 2 months, the director, for medical reasons, had to retire on the spot. And so suddenly I was interim director and chief curator. And I did that for a year. and they hired someone to be director. And when that person came in, I was pretty burned out. Those were really, really long days.
Sure.
And then I found this position here. I saw that position here in Dayton open, a fabulous museum, great collection that I was familiar with. And so I jumped to Dayton and have loved it.
Yeah. I remember when you left Phoenix, the art community was actually upset that you left Phoenix Art Museum because you were very much instrumental and interested in Western art.
Yeah.
And we felt like, wow, they just took a hole out of that complete museum.
Yeah, yeah, there's Phoenix, certainly huge metropolitan place who a lot of people wanted to be that metropolitan place. But the Western roots, those parts that people admire in the West,
right?
That was a real part of Phoenix Art Museum, because so often you go to museums and it's like, okay, you see all these names of artists, and it's like you can be in a museum in Tokyo or Paris or New York. It doesn't matter. It's all just kind of interchangeable in some ways. But some places like Phoenix, with that Western connection, that somewhat local view of things, the Philip Curtis gallery. It's like, no, this helps define this museum, this place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do miss that. I'm not working with Western art right now, except a little bit nuggets here and there that are in the collection and things that come up. But otherwise, I'm not really working with it as I had.
Yeah.
Got an exhibition coming up in 2023 of the Tia collection.
Oh yeah, which one are you getting?
The one that was
New
in
Beginnings?
Scottsdale. Yeah,
New
New Beginnings.
Wow, it's a fantastic exhibit.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
the catalog too, the book is wonderful as well.
Yeah. So I was able to contribute a little something about Dayton Art Institute for that catalog.
Oh, very good. And so when is that coming? When is that going to be there?
That will be here in 2023.
Nice.
So early 2023. I think it's in February. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. I mean,
that'll be like old home week for me.
Yeah.
Because there were paintings in that collection that I tried to acquire for the Phoenix Art Museum.
I bet you did.
So
Phoenix Art Museum is good about getting good pieces. It's always a struggle for a museum when somebody, and usually it's a dealer that has a great piece, and they don't want to wait 6 months or a year to sell it, especially if it's expensive. And you have somebody that will just write a check. It's it's tougher.
It is tougher with museums. Museums can move very slowly, especially museums that don't have big acquisition funds.
Yeah.
And I know the times when I was in Phoenix and we acquired some work through you. It was a process. And when you look back at the amounts that we're talking about, they weren't that much, really, but it still took some real effort to get it done.
So you have an exhibit up right now that you also wrote part of the catalog for on the Ralston Crawford, and that looked very interesting. Maybe you could just tell us. I know usually these things, I like to have these podcasts where they're not dated, but he's such an interesting artist. If nothing else, just tell us a little bit about his career.
Yeah, Ralston Crawford, 20th century artist, mid 20th century, early and mid 20th century guy. Earlier part of the kind of precisionist movement, that hard edge, leaning toward abstraction with solid use of color, forced perspective, really good work. And then in the 40s, during the war, he moved more toward abstraction. in the sense of, even though it's based on nature, it's not necessarily something of recognizable subject matter in many cases. And this exhibition looks at that period when, in the late 1930s, he began to take airplane trips. And then during the war, working with the Navy Air Force Weather Bureau, he made weather maps that showed, well, they're not weather maps in the sense of you finish one, oh, that's 3 weeks ago, but more showing how airflow can travel through mountains and stuff. And so he helped create those ideas. But he saw the explosion at Bikini Atoll. He was the sole artist to witness Test Able at Bikini Atoll as a commissioned position working for Fortune magazine.
That was a hydrogen bomb, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It was, and it's a fascinating time for his development. And this show puts together paintings as well as drawings and photographs that he took. He had a big commission in 45 to take photographs of the Curtiss Wright airplane plant in Buffalo, New York. And the commission was actually from the lighting company, Miller Lighting Company, because of the 9 miles of continuous fluorescent lighting in the building. And so he's in there taking photographs, and then he starts to make drawings from these photographs where you see where he's like pulling out shapes and ideas, and you start to see the abstractions happening.
Yeah.
And then they're getting more detailed and less detailed until you get the finished painting, where if you start with the finished painting, you don't really know what you're looking at per se. But when you see the steps, you're like, oh, I get it. And there's several of those moments in this exhibition where you're seeing the development of abstract ideas, abstract compositions. And so it's 72 works total, and it's really cool. It is a really, really good exhibition.
I would have to think those weather maps too really influenced him from an abstraction kind of point of view, because it's abstract thinking, first of all.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. Did you have any of those weather maps in the show? Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we do. We have some of the weather maps that he made.
So how does somebody like that get on your radar? How do you, I mean, did you have a big holdings, or how does that happen?
Yeah, in this instance, the curator who worked on it for the Vilcek Foundation, Emily Navratil Shukart, I've known her for years. And we were talking probably 2014 at a conference, a curators conference, and she's telling me she's starting to work on this thing. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me know. And then when I got to Dayton, then things are really getting serious for this exhibition with her. And Dayton and the Wright brothers, I live in my house now, I'm less than 2 miles away from where the Wright brothers lived.
Wow, that's interesting.
So flight is really important. We have the Wright-Patterson Museum, the Air Force facility is here in Dayton. So it just made perfect sense. I'm like, because the flight portion, I didn't go enough into that, the flight portion of this exhibition, you see how it informed Ralston Crawford's thinking of this kind of compression of time and space. You can go from here to there in a relatively short period, and you get these abstract views of the world from up high, and how those ideas kind of then fall into place to create a work of art where you see, I'm making a drawing about something I'm seeing here, then I'm making a drawing that's something there and something, and suddenly you bring them together like shuffling cards, and you have this abstract idea of what this journey was. And that kind of thought process really you see throughout his work. And one of the paintings he makes during World War II, one of the few paintings he made when he was during the war, is of a crashed bomber. And the bomber airplane, it's still the plane coming into play in his work.
And so did you actually, when this show came up, did you do the curatorial work as far as deciding what would go into the show, or was it a combination of you and the other individuals?
Actually, in this instance, I was more the tail end of things. That Emily really did the selection.
She did the heavy lifting part.
This is her creation. So the essay that I wrote for the catalog was more about putting Crawford's images, kind of modernist images, in a historical context with other images of airplanes.
Back to those components like cars, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm sure it helps because you can think in the same terms that you did your dissertation.
Yeah, so you're looking at Malevich to Max Ernst and those types of artists, even John Singer Sargent doing image of a crashed airplane. And if you're comparing crashed airplanes, then you're going into ideas of Icarus, and it gets really complicated.
And there is a catalog you can buy. I saw it on the website of the art. Oh yeah, let's see it.
What the heck? I'll promote.
Promote. Yeah, I love that image, by the way. It's this kind of abstract.
It's a terrific one. Great book. Good, thick, heavy, nice.
Yeah.
The tab
and only $70. I saw it. I'm going to order one actually.
It really is nice. The Merrill Publishing produced that and did a great job. Really good color reproductions.
And that's open through what, January sometime?
Till January 13th, I believe it is.
Yeah. So if people are hearing this and it's later on in life, you can go to the museum and order the book, and I'm sure Jerry will be happy to sign those for you.
Oh, sure. Anytime.
Along with the carpet samples that you need to pick out. I was going to say, you've been doing this now for, God, how long? 25 years?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
20 years now, 25.
Yeah. So what have you learned in that period of time about being a curator?
That there's a lot more email messages than people know. But that's probably everybody's workplace anymore. It's just that I would say the one thing I learned and have grown from starting Curator to later is the experience of seeing art is so important to people that don't try to weigh an exhibition down with too much minutia and detail. Nobody cares what color pants somebody was wearing on a Tuesday when they were visiting. That if you're going to mention another artist, unless it's Picasso or Monet or Warhol, chances are people don't know, because most people coming to museums don't have degrees in art history.
No, they're taking their date. They're taking their first date to the museum. That's
exactly. So don't then put stuff on the wall that if they don't know what it is, they feel ignorant. No, put stuff up that on a label, make a label simple, make it say something that says a little bit about the art, a little bit about the artist, but then makes them look back at the art.
Mm.
So I would say what I've learned as a curator is the importance of the experience. And if people, hopefully it's enough to whet an appetite. So then they're like, wow, that was really interesting exhibition. I want to know more. Good, buy the catalog,
Yeah.
but don't put the catalog on the wall.
Yeah, that's great advice, actually.
Because you don't want to stand and read a book.
Yeah. Well, I think galleries are probably better at that in a lot of ways, that we keep it to the art. Of course, we have a different motive, right? We're trying to sell the art, but I think we kind of fall into that. We're trying to focus on the art, not as much as some of the other things. So what would you tell those individuals who might want to go into this field? Because, I mean, you had a really interesting route. I mean, I bet there's not many people that worked the night shift for 10 years doing boxes and going, all of a sudden, I'm going to be a curator. I get it. So what would you tell? I mean, I think that there's some wise words you can probably tell some individuals out there who might be in your same situation back in the day.
I would say that if you want it, you really have to go for it. You can't, it's not a position that you do kind of part-time. You can't just kind of fake your way through or anything. That you really need to know your stuff. You need to study. You need to try to be the best art historian you can be. Recognize that in so many ways that it's a lifestyle career. It takes up a lot of evenings, a lot of weekends. A lot of what I do outside of the museum is museum related. And you better really enjoy that, because if you don't, you're not going to do as well. But it's remarkably rewarding. You meet fascinating people. I've been invited into homes and collectors' homes that have this just amazing art that I never would have been allowed into otherwise. And it's fabulous. It's a terrific career. You need to really want it and really go for it.
And what I hear in your voice is you better love the art.
And you better love the art. Yeah. And not only do you need to love the art, but if you're going to either teach or be in curatorial world, better be able to show that enthusiasm to others. Because if I can't get excited about something, why should I expect anybody else to?
Yeah. And if you can get excited, you might be like that teacher at the community college that ignites somebody to go, I need to do this. Yeah, it's absolutely true that you never know when somebody's going to be having that first experience. I always, people say it a lot. Oh, it's so wonderful to see the children coming through on tours and things. Yeah, it is. That it was in Florida that the county museum was in. I believe it's every fourth grader at some point comes on a tour in through the museum. And you figure by fourth grade, between fourth and sixth grade, you're starting to figure out a little bit of who you are and things. And if that's the first time you go to a museum, you could have a remarkable experience that you remember for the rest of your life. Yeah. Whether you go into the arts or not, immaterial. It's the fact that these are experiences that people carry with them. And so it's an honor to do this sort of thing, but it's also something to take seriously, something to
You know, it's one thing we're saving objects and taking care of objects for future generations, but we're also helping to create ways of thinking for future generations.
Yeah. And you don't know how that will change the world.
And yeah, because it's all about empathy, you know, because if a kid is suddenly who's just thinking he's from his, you know, neighborhood and never thinks beyond that, and suddenly is looking at an object that was made in China 5,000 years ago, and he kind of can imagine somebody making that object with hands and being like, wow, that's building empathy. And so that's what it's all about. Those are important things that can change people. That's why the arts are important.
Yeah. Like the crow.
Like the Curator. Yep.
Yeah. And just like the crow, that empathy for that painting. I'm telling you, there's something there. It clearly comes out when you sit here and listen to you. So yeah, having that empathy for the object. That's it. Well, this was fantastic. We need to talk more often, just talk.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, any way I can help you, you let me know. I'm always happy to, and I've never been to your city, so one of these days I'll come see the museum.
That'd be great. Love to give you a tour.
Yes. Well, you're wonderful. And you know what? I had a couple different people go, oh, you need to interview Jerry. He would be really interesting. So there's people that have done this podcast that have said you need to be on the show. And then you reached out to me, I think, for a textile that you needed some information on. And I was like, well, this is Kismet. You know, I definitely am going to be having Jerry on if he'll do it. So I appreciate very much that you took the time. And if you get a chance, Jim Ballinger also did this podcast. So now you're with Jim.
Wonderful.
All right.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I expect to talk. I want to talk to you more about your book project for the dissertation that you did. There's something there, my friend.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, it is a good one. I know it takes effort and energy, but you know, my Dixons are still, I'm ready to loan them.
Thank you.
All right. Well, keep me in the loop and we'll talk soon. Thanks.
All right.
Jerry
Take
Smith.
care.
Thank you.